Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren, und wieder ist es Dienstagabend und wir haben wieder eine illustre Runde für Sie zusammengestellt. Heute von einem extrem spannenden Anbieter im CRM-Markt, den der ein oder andere heute vielleicht etwas intensiver kennenlernen wird, als er ihn bis vorher auf seinem Schirm, auf dem Radar hatte. Die Company mit dem spannenden und erfrischenden Namen Freshworks. Und ich habe mir erlaubt, in meiner Facebook-Ankündigung, bevor ich das super schöne Bild mit den einzelnen Protagonisten zur Verfügung hatte, einen entsprechenden Ansatz mit Zitronen und Frische zu zeigen, weil ich finde es sehr gut, dass man eine positive Assoziation der Frische, der vitaminreichen Ergänzung hat und dann auch die Kurve ziehen kann, dass wir in manchmal etwas verrückten Zeiten gerade leben. Wie Sie das schon von uns kennen, folgt nach der freundlichen Ankündigung in deutscher Sprache, um Sie auch da abzuholen, our simultaneous change into English language. So from here on, as the majority of our audience is more comfortable with speaking English, and we have this time 3x3 fantastic situation that we have 3 German native speakers and 3 English native speakers, or a bit of mix up, but that we will see a bit after the introduction round. I would appreciate that I would like to thank you very much that you took yourself the time. I learned from my American hosts, where I am in the role as a guest, that the starting up procedure is and welcoming the folks which are our guests in a bit more, be a bit more humble and be grateful that you have the pleasure that they are there and they took themselves the time. So really, I'm very, very happy that not only Prakash give us the honor, but also 2 of his colleagues, Peter and David. And I would like Prakash to start with the introduction round, where you come from, what your role is in Freshworks, and what you did before.
Okay. Guten Abend.
Yep.
So thanks for inviting me. Between that and Guten Morgen, I'm exhausting my German, but I'm extremely happy to be here, and I'm thankful that Peter and David have also accepted to join this, because they bring a lot of depth and CRM experience as well. I joined Freshworks about 12 months ago, about a year ago. For people who do not know Freshworks is headquartered in San Mateo in California. It was founded in Chennai in India about 10 years ago, and we are a SaaS software company which serves 3 personas. We have 3 major product lines. One, to serve the head of customer support for an omni-channel based support solution, whether you need bots or chat or multitude of messaging channels, ticketing, and all of that stuff. That's the Freshdesk product line, and the company was founded on that. And the second one is around IT services management, right? IT help desk and all of that stuff, which is the Freshservice. Mm-hmm. And the third and the brand new one, where we feel we have the most compelling vision for, is around CRM, which is Freshworks CRM. And so those are the 3 major product lines. I'm the product officer who's responsible for all of those. And I've been in the Silicon Valley for 30 years. I've worked at startup companies, sold it to other companies, and most recently I spent about 5 years at Oracle before I came to Freshworks. And just on a personal note, I was born in Chennai, before and I did my undergraduate in Chennai before I immigrated to this country, to US. So to me, it is a nice circle of life to be associated back with Freshworks. So besides the fact that we feel we have good products, we have a very good company culture, which is what we're even more proud of than even the products, where we know we just treat employees extremely, extremely well. We think they are super critical for our success, and that's why we're able to attract good people. And the fact that it was founded in Chennai is like a nice icing on the top. So that's my introduction. So I'll hand it over to Peter, who can do a German introduction, and then David can do it in English again. So English, German between two English. So.
Yeah.
Lovely idea. Thank you, Prakash.
Fully bilingual event here.
Ja, guten Abend, Deutschland. Ich bin ursprünglich aus Pforzheim bei Karlsruhe. Habe in Karlsruhe Informatik studiert. And I'll switch back to English, but basically I'm originally from Germany, from a small town called Pforzheim, which is close to Stuttgart. For those who were not too familiar with Stuttgart, that's where Porsche and Mercedes are come from. You could compare it to San Jose, like either you know the city or you don't. And then moved to the Valley right after college, worked as an engineer for a couple of years, had my own little startup, and then made my way into enterprise SaaS. Worked at a company called BrightEdge that was founded by Salesforce product managers, and then picked up a lot of the best practices around enterprise SaaS, and eventually made my way into Adobe back in 2014 when Adobe just made the transition from perpetual licenses to SaaS. And then we all know what kind of story then Adobe went through. It was a very exciting ride. But throughout these years, what was very challenging is that back then already, it was obvious that in order to give businesses the ability to build these customer-centric experiences, you needed to reimagine and rebuild a lot of these capabilities. And given that a lot of these capabilities were former acquisitions, you can imagine that these backends were inherently different and separated. And then when I thought that maybe there must be a better way or a different way to do that, Salesforce came along, and I thought, and I almost fell for it, because when you think of Salesforce, you would imagine that Salesforce is arguably the best SaaS player out there, and that they know how to bring these capabilities together. And then after joining Salesforce, I realized that maybe arguably Salesforce is even in a worse spot than Adobe when it comes to bringing these capabilities together. And especially when it comes to building machine learning capabilities, you realize that a lot of data that these legacy SaaS vendors have is oftentimes not really relevant for the predictions that you're trying to make. And just when I was wondering what my next career move might be, Freshworks came along, and I think a lot of my values, and I think the opportunity that Freshworks has, and my own past really matched well. Because on one side, I realized that a lot of the incumbents, or like the big ones, are facing fundamental challenges in terms of building software that truly breaks down these silos across marketing, sales, and service. And then on top of that, when it comes to then building machine learning capabilities that truly work and that are truly accurate, you need to be able to collect relevant training data. And I think that's like the reason I'm really excited about Freshworks. And I think Prakash already mentioned, in addition to the opportunity that we all see, the culture is really unique. It's very much focused on making sure that we truly enjoy our work. And I think very, very excited to be at Freshworks, and very excited to talk more about what we're doing here today.
Cool.
Very nice. Thanks. I guess it's my turn. So, first of all, thanks for having us. I was keen to have this conversation. I've been in the enterprise application space the last 18, 20 years. And regardless of which organization I look back in my career, the elevated discussion around the customer, this idea of customer centricity, we're all efforting to be more customer centric, has been consistent. across. So what's interesting, the last 5 or 7 years, I've been focused in the back office in terms of back office applications. I've been in the front office as well most of my career. Those two worlds between the front and back office seem to have been just merged and bled across. The lines have been very difficult to draw in the sand. But just from a background perspective, my lens or point of view is more on the go-to-market side. So Prakash and Peter are more from a product point of view. I'm coming to this conversation as really a user, a consumer of CRM information in many ways. I've sold a variety of applications from a seller's point of view, as well as mainly from a product or go-to-market side. And so that's kind of my perspective. Not only am I looking to market a CRM solution, but I'm also a consumer of these capabilities in order to do my job. The types of brands that I've been experienced with, I'm a third generation San Franciscan. So before there was Silicon Valley, I grew up there. And actually, ironically, I spent a good portion of my career at Oracle. Not many folks know, before Oracle was there, it was essentially a zoo, a marine animal park. And so I just think it's ironic that the team at Oracle is sitting upon the ground that used to house wild animals. I think that's maybe there's some subtlety there.
It's nice that you say wild animals and not simply apes. Yeah.
Well, well, you could read between the lines on that one. Absolutely.
well, I guess so.
But
I love your kind of humor. I love it.
It will get drier. Not to worry. But it was interesting. Speaking of apes, as we look at the evolution of ourselves. So going from Oracle, I spent some time across the pond, a little closer to you, at a company called Sage. So it was interesting to see how companies. Yes, yeah.
I nearly ended up there as well, by the way.
It's almost inevitable. It's interesting the point of view of a company that is European first, right? They're the second largest software company versus an American first lens. I think that's important because we're all, whether you're a small business or a mid-sized company, we're all thinking about and engaging with our customers that probably are doing business in multiple countries. So the need to have a more personalized experience that spans different borders is becoming more and more challenging and more important. And then moving on to the last 5 years at Salesforce, I spent my time within the partner ecosystem at Salesforce. And so as a company called Financial Force, so this idea of the worlds of where you're extending the handoff from the customer acquisition to delivering on the customer fulfillment side has become more important. As we're monetizing our products and services in a more subscription-based model, this idea of recurring revenue becomes the marquee of success. And I think as we look back in the world of COVID the last year or 12 months, I would argue those companies that really cracked the nut on recurring revenue models and understanding their customers, those are the ones that are winning. And I think a lot of folks, including us, have identified this need for customer experience, customer acquisition, and kind of as well as how we monetize that correctly is a full circle, a continuous cycle. We're always dating our customers. So I'm hoping we can talk a little bit more about that today as well.
We can actually, sorry if I interrupt, but I already right now would like to deviate from our pre-planned questions.
All right, let's do it.
Right?
You honestly offer us some fantastic stepping ins, such as Thomas was telling that he nearly ended with Sage. And
I ended up there, not ended there.
Okay, well, put it that way in a polite manner. It is an interesting company which utilized the merger and acquisition story, but missed the point to give the user really seamless integration of the products they bought together. And I had the pleasure that one of the German managing directors, Peter Dewald, I was just looking for his name. Peter, at that time, was keen to have a real nerd who has an extroverted attitude. And he reasonably made me an offer. And I said, Mr. Dewald, honestly, if there are 2 alpha chips in the cage, it's not good for one of them. And I believe that I better step back. I'm the younger one. And this was the end of the story, as the price was not right. So much for that one. And it's fascinating. So you have also spent some time in Salesforce in that special sector and that special area. I find this really interesting. In your experience in the day-to-day life, how regularly have you met Mark?
Well, I have not met Mark personally. I've been on a few conference calls where he was part of the discussion. But yeah, I mean, he also has his roots that date back to Oracle as well, which is interesting. But you mentioned the kind of like with Sage as well, this top down versus bottoms up approach. We talked about from a platform up versus a top down via mergers and acquisitions, and kind of trying to bring these things together after the fact, whether you're a large company like Oracle or Sage and Salesforce included. I think we've seen in the market that it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a little bit different from a Freshworks point of view. Why I was attracted was this. It's hard, just like when you're painting a wall, it's that prep. You want to have the beautiful finish to look at the end, but the heavy lift from the bottoms up in terms of, can we get the data and the insight right before we start trying to glue these things together after the fact? And thinking about it from the user's perspective, that's something a lot of organizations I feel has made an afterthought. But as we think about these buzzwords like AI and machine learning, making it front and center from a design principle, and Peter and Prakash can get into that more than I can, is to me really interesting as we think about democratization in terms of these business applications, so that folks actually use them. I mean, what a concept!
Yeah.
Wanting to use a CRM.
Cool message.
Coming back a step, so what Peter said something that surprised me a little. So
only a little.
With arguable Salesforce, of course, arguable the best SaaS player around. Check on that. So it's hard to not stumble into that.
Right.
Then you follow it up with them. They're actually in a worse spot, not stop, spot than Adobe. What did you mean by that?
Very good question. So, obviously, you could argue that Salesforce invented SaaS, right? And my understanding was the example that I gave was that at Adobe, we acquired different players for different use cases. You had marketing automation. You had AEM for web content management system, Ad Cloud, Analytics Cloud, etc.
Yeah.
And then I think the discussion that we all have had for the last 10 years or so is how do you make these tools work with each other? And I think Adobe's approach has been very much to build things from the ground up, given their success with Creative Cloud. And I think Adobe has always looked at things in a way from how do we re-engineer, how do we actually build it so that they work from scratch. And that's obviously very hard when you try to do that when businesses make, let's say, $1 billion revenue each, right? And especially if you have deliver results on a quarterly basis. And then when I saw how Adobe was let's say trying or working on reimagining and rebuilding these capabilities, I figured if there's one player in the market that should know how to do that, would be Salesforce. And right before I joined Salesforce, Salesforce made the MuleSoft acquisition. And then I thought to myself, oh, wait a second, these guys really know what they're doing, because why else would they have bought MuleSoft? And I thought I think that's the comment that you mentioned, is that that I thought that given that Salesforce invented SaaS, which now I would call legacy SaaS, I didn't realize that they never had to figure out how to actually make various SaaS platforms work with each other. Because let's say from the outside, and in hindsight, I'm upset with myself because I should have known better back then. But from the outside, it seems as if Salesforce is like this one nice SaaS application, whether it's like Marketing Cloud or Sales Cloud or Service Cloud. Yeah. And then only after joining Sales Cloud, you then realize that, well, there's the core platform, which is like sales and service. But then all of the others are literally still almost independent companies, even though they all fall under the Salesforce umbrella. So to answer your question, I literally kind of fell for this idea that Salesforce invented SaaS, and given that they invented SaaS, they probably figured out a way how to bring these technologies together. And I think we know that like it's in a situation where it's not that easy, like to kind of bring these capabilities together, and that there are like many players like ourselves, like Freshworks, that started out with a fresh slate and are able to like build these capabilities natively. So I hope that kind of answers your question, or like why you were so surprised by that. But like to answer your question, I was surprised myself. Mm-hmm. And like when you think of Salesforce as like the inventor of SaaS, so it would be hard to imagine that they didn't have an answer for how to make these pieces together. And then, like I said, if I had to compare Adobe and Salesforce, I think Adobe's approach is then to really build things from scratch, given the history. Because like they've rewritten, let's say Photoshop, I don't know how many times, and I think there's like a little bit of this instinct to rewrite things all over again.
How does Freshworks deal with that? Because, sorry, Prakash, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is this, right, which is every time a new entrant tries to get into a crowded space, you also think about what is the level playing field here, right? So if you look at it, Salesforce and is a behemoth. I mean, it's a very extremely successful company, right? So you look at what areas can we get a more an opportunity to enter and level the ground, so to speak. And today it happens to be AI, ML, and intelligence and insight. Right, CRM, for it to be truly successful, it needs to go from being a bookkeeping reporting solution to being something that is really helpful to the salespeople.
Yeah.
Right. So if it does that, then it becomes more usable for them, as opposed to it being like a Google Doc. Today, CRM is like a glorified Google Doc. Right. People just put in the stuff whenever they need to, and then downstream, there are, you run invoices, you run revenue recognition and all of that stuff, but the sales rep gets very little out of that. The person, here's the irony of CRM, the person who you depend on the most to give you the data gets the least out of that. That is why, if you look at it, the adoption is forced top down. So what we want to do is, if you have bad data, bad models, it'll provide bad insights, which will make it even more harder for the sales reps to use it. So what we want to do is say, hey, work on providing insights, but more importantly, work on providing a solution which the sales reps would actually love to use. Almost drive kind of bottoms up adoption as opposed to top down mandate. And that will allow our AI tools a fair shot on providing more meaningful insights. So to us, that is the opportunity, and that is why we think we are different, and that's why we think the world needs a new CRM, because we want to bring in the silos of data that we just talked about, the marketing data, the sales data, and all the touch points for a customer, the support data, and all the stuff, so that we have a uniform view of your customer and all the activities that are happening, so that the sales rep knows if there are some outstanding tickets for the customer before he tries to do an upsell, or the support person knows that a deal is in the last stages of being closed, so we provide better attention to this customer. That's one aspect of that. But the other aspect is, as we crunch these data, we can tell the sales rep, hey, look, this campaign that you used 3 templates to run email. So this email template was the most effective for you for this class of customers. This is what you should rerun. So help them get their job done better and provide a very intuitive UI for that. So all of those things will help us collect better better data telemetry, which makes the AI better, right? Everybody can write good algorithms. It is the training data that makes the good algorithm work or not. And that's why we feel we have an opportunity here.
Right. Helping the salesperson get their job done better it's always been the goal, and yet it's something that gets missed a lot. A lot of the early successes with CRM and a lot of the early successes of SaaS CRM were cases where individual salespeople were accessing these tools for themselves to make their own accounts work better. That's what made it popular. That's what made it grow. And suddenly businesses realized, hey, the CRM technology from the cloud, which wasn't the cloud at the time, but I've gotten used to calling it the cloud. It's wonderful. Let's start using it throughout the organization. And it started moving up to the management chain, to the C-suite, and it got further and further away from the salespeople and became less and less useful to them over time.
Right.
We need to get it back into their hands.
Yep.
And what I love to observe is that you, in your friendly approach, were just telling about the sales, but it is a lot more. And your platform has the advantage and the opportunity to make the life of sales, service, management, and marketing easier. And to make the life easier, I have a nasty question. Is crappy data a problem for sexy products?
Yes, it is.
It is. Yes.
Yes. Next question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Next question.
No questions. Not good for a conversation.
I'll just tell you, add just one more thing, right? Which is, like you said, we focus on the sales rep. But if you look at it, even what is the single biggest thing that a marketing person obsesses about, which is conversion of visitors coming in. And what is the single biggest thing a sales rep covers the most? It's leads, right? So if you really look at it, what we have done is we have included bots and customization as a part of the Freshworks CRM product. So if a visitor comes to your website, especially coming in from an email campaign that you had sent them, that they click on it and they come there, we know who the person is. So you can give a more customized welcome, Ralph, kind of saying, as opposed to saying hi. And then you can have a meaningful full conversation with the bot. And then you can almost schedule an appointment with the sales rep. It'll automatically connect them. And what happens is the marketing person got a lead that just accelerated through the funnel. And the sales rep has a qualified lead to pursue. And these are, to do that, today people put in 2 or 3 solutions together, glue them together, extract data from one to the other and things like that. And it just doesn't need to be that hard. And that is our premise. That is why we feel marketing, sales, support, automation, AI, they all need to be seamlessly working with each other. Not through a whole bunch of integrations.
That is a cool and sexy message, and therefore I put in my nasty question about the crappy data, because you gave the answer to make it, the data, less crappy and more sexy, helps the approach to ease the pain of each of the departments, and really get that working together approach make happen. And what I question very much is that the products have built in, let's say, data quality tools. How do you manage the data quality approach in your line of suite products?
So a couple of things, right? The most important thing is it's counterintuitive, providing a much more usable, better UI, and providing a solution where the user feels they're getting something out of the tool is the easiest way to get high quality data. Okay? Because as you're using the tool, you are providing telemetry, right? As your that is the fastest way to get the data. Then on top of that, if you, for example, if leads are coming in, if you want to enrich them, we provide API integrations to do all this enrichment and stuff like that you want to do. So between the combination of that and also having one universal customer record where all the data lives off of, makes it easy to have clean data. If I have only one record of Thomas in the system, regardless of how he came in, which product he came in, which product he has bought, which product he's trialing, how many tickets he has, all of the stuff, if it lives off of Thomas, it is so much easier to run analysis on that. So the underpinning for all of this is what we call the universal customer record, which is the foundation for our CDP that runs on top of that, where you can segment the data and everything. But that's also the foundation for us providing clean, usable data. I don't know, Peter, if I covered everything, but
yeah, maybe like two things I want to cover is that I think like in terms of value proposition, like let's say Salesforce has a CDP, Adobe has a CDP, SAP has a CDP. But the big difference is that the circumstances in which each of us operate are different. That means for Salesforce to literally create a CDP, or like truly, and we all know how much they've struggled doing that, or how long it took, let's say, any of the other incumbents to build that. The difference is that once you are a public company, once you have these revenues that each of the incumbents have, you spend 95% of your efforts on actually maintaining that revenue, and you spend like a fraction of your revenue, if at all, on actually making these things work with each other. That means the big challenge is, and I think a good, someone told me that once, is that enterprise software is about solving seemingly underwhelming problems at scale. Because I think what we talk about is like, how hard could it be to have like a unified customer profile? How hard could it be to, like, let's say, align marketing with sales? It doesn't seem to be rocket science, but it does become rocket science when you have a certain scale and when you have a certain size that you have to maintain. Yeah. And I think that's where we come in and where we are different. That means the ability to, as Prakash said, like really focus on making these work, or like these use cases work end to end, does take like a focus that we have. That's number one. And I think one thing that we talked about at Refresh, which is our user conference from last month, was that in many ways we are able to deliver on this promise that I think the industry has given for now almost a decade. And that's number one. But the number two, or like the second piece, is when we talk about crappy data. Crappy data is not only, let's say, data that's out of date or that it's like lacking data, but when it comes to machine learning, it's also about irrelevant data. So there's a ton of data in these legacy SaaS systems that is unrelated and irrelevant for the predictions that we're trying to make. And we are taking this approach that with a UI first approach to AI, we want to enable brands to collect relevant training data that they can use to then make these predictions. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that crappy data, which is like a terrible term, is data that's basically outdated or not relevant. But in our case, we're actively solving this by enabling these businesses to collect relevant data in order to make these predictions. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it's a cool one.
Makes perfect sense and actually relates pretty much to what I just asked Ralph to share, which is one of your slides.
Huh? Okay. You asked me to share. Apologies, Master.
I just ended the writing, so no need to apologize.
Circles are in circles. They're driving me crazy.
This is basically what you just talked about. Yeah? So this actually was what I was wondering a little about during the analyst day as well. So the main difference to other companies or to incumbents is that you put the UI first, whereas the other ones are saying AI first, or many of the other ones are saying that. So
maybe a quick comment there, because what I think when we talked about this internally is that like if you provide a CDP, that alone is not going to solve anything.
No,
like all of these things have to come together, and that's why we kind of put Freshworks CRM in the middle, because we're saying that all of these pieces have to come together in order for it to work. Like first of all, you need to be able to like provide this end-to-end ability to align marketing, sales, and service. That's number one. That's more so at the front end level, if you will. Then the CDP is obviously more on the back end level. It's hard enough, but delivering a CDP by itself is not going to solve it at all. And then the key piece, and I think that's where we are different, like have what I call unfair advantage. It is to enable brands to collect training data through the user interface. And I'll give you an example. Very, very easily, what Prakash mentioned earlier is that we want to enable sales organizations to turn their account executives into, let's say, labelers that provide the relevant training data for machine learning. That means, for example, when an account executive logs in, we basically ask them quickly, like, look at these two deals. Which of the two deals do you think is more likely to convert? And collecting training data in that fashion through the UI on an ongoing basis over time allows you to then collect relevant training data, not training data that you started collecting 10, 15 years ago when you didn't even know that you might want to train machine learning capabilities at some point. I call this pre-AI data. Like Salesforce, Adobe, and like all these incumbents, they have like a ton of pre-AI data, but that data has nothing to do with any of the predictions that we're trying to make. And what we're doing right now is like we're basically in an era where those companies that are in a position to collect relevant training data and have figured out a way how to do that, and it's like why, let's say, the Qualtrics of this world and like the SurveyMonks of this world are trying to kind of position themselves as the enablers for relevant training data. But I think it's much, much more advanced than that, because you need to enable brands to collect training data as it happens. And that means within the application as it happens and not after the fact. Like if you send out a survey that someone fills out, let's say a week or 2 weeks after they looked at a deal or they talked to a customer, that training data is then already a little less relevant and a little less, let's say, like applicable. And we want to basically drive this UI first approach when it comes to AI, which means to enable businesses to collect training data from their employees or consumers, depending on what the use case is. And we are right in the middle where we bring all of these three pieces together, and only all these three pieces together will then allow you to then build what we would call it the CRM 2.0 or even 3.0.
And I'll just add one more thing to that, right? Which is, if you look at it in enterprises today, in companies, there's always an email coming out periodically from the sales ops or from the CRO saying, hey, if you don't put the deals into the CRM, you won't get any commission or this, that, and the other, right? It's very top-down driven, forcing it down. But look at it this way, right? When it came to using Slack, for example, within the companies, there wasn't a mandate from IT saying you have to use Slack. It is just that people already went and got Slack for their departments. Then IT was forced to say, oh, wow, I have 7 Slack instances running. Let me get an enterprise deal and bring all of them together, right? It's the other way around. That's what is bottoms-up adoption of products, because the user feels there is immense value and they're going to go out of their way to bring it in and adopt it. They're not looking for sales cycles, sales pitches, and all of that stuff, right? So why can't CRM be that way? Why can't it be that, the salespeople feel, hey, this is something that gives me pleasure in using and makes my day better. And how best to do that without having an intuitive UI that understands the user and does something about it. So that's how we think about it.
Offers two avenues of questions, actually. Well, first, I would like to ask Peter. So I'm not an deep AI expert, but if I would think that if I asked somebody out of two possible deals, which is the one that is more likely to make it? Isn't that a kind of a biased, a loaded question? That
it is
self-fulfilling.
It is. But here's actually the actual answer. So actually, the challenge with AI in general is that people believe that it's something magical, that it's like very hard to make work. In fact, it's very easy. Machine learning comes down to logistic regression. Like I'm oversimplifying on purpose, but at the end of the day, the model represents like a very small fraction of the accuracy of the prediction.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the training data is 80%, 90% of the accuracy of the prediction. So in the case that I just mentioned, we would not ask one account executive alone. Like you ask across the board, and then you can see, because you do then have actual data that you can compare to. You can then see over time which account executive is more on point and is more in line with the actual results.
Okay.
And over time, you can then overweigh and deprioritize depending on how close they are to prediction. But I think the big benefit is that like collecting and gathering what I think David actually coined that term, like tacit knowledge, because we all oftentimes know why a deal, like actually we don't know why a deal is going to close or not, but you just know because you've done it so long and people have done it for that long for a given company. And if you can actually extract it from those few account executives that are actually really, really good, you can then make those predictions accessible and available to like newer account executives that may or may not know what they're doing. But to answer your question, it is biased if you only take one account executive into account. But if you actually collect that training data across the board, you can then truly see which ones are in line and which ones are off when it comes to understanding what's happening with their business.
Okay, one comment on that too, just in terms of, you think about our sales reps, there's always those 2 or 3 sales executives on the sales team that are the top performers. Those are the guys that are really going to help make your number every quarter. But we don't really know why. And most often they've been doing it for a while. They've touched more deals than most of the sales organization. So if we think about, well, what's the so what of having great AI training data? I mean, if you think about it, it's not just sales velocity or deal velocity. It's not just conversion rates, but also things like ramp time, which is a huge challenge for most sales organizations. You've got turnover. What if you could turn 80% of those sellers into your top 20% of your performers? And a shortcut to getting there is, how can we tap into that hard to understand tacit knowledge? Because if I'm a top seller, I don't really know why I'm so good at what I do, or at identifying where my territory or patch should I be focusing on. But what AI can do is help elevate that thinking and to expand that to the rest of the sales organization. So if I'm a new guy who just started, I've never sold in this space before, could we accelerate their ramp time dramatically by using this training data and, if you will, tacit knowledge to accelerate that time to value or ROI on the sales rep? That's a huge value to most organizations.
Right. Maybe just one more comment, because I think that was the biggest epiphany for me as I was working on Einstein at Salesforce, but then also at Sensei at Adobe. Anyone who believes that, let's say, a small group of people who may be very intelligent, that they can somehow look at, let's say, features or like data points and then make predictions, what is a highly likely closed deal or less likely to close deal, that's wrong. There's no PhD student in the world, or like a PhD anywhere in the world, that can predict how likely a deal is to close for a sales organization that sells, let's say, pharmaceuticals or concrete in Colorado. That means if you believe that data science is about predicting any kind of like all kinds of human interactions in the world, that's wrong. The only way to do that is to actually ask real people and collecting that data from real people who know what they're doing. That's actually the solution. Training data is at the end of the day the deciding factor whether AI works or not. And those organizations that are customer centric and that go actually at the customer and go towards the customer and ask them to provide the training data, they will prevail. Anyone who believes that they can actually hire 5 PhDs from Stanford or anywhere else, and that they will somehow be able to predict and create a model that will be accurate and applicable for all these different organizations, whether they're in enterprise, mid-market, and small business, they're obviously wrong.
Okay, what you're
basically have the right data to look at because they don't have the customer side of the argument. When you're trying to predict whether a sale is going to close, your AI is basically its prediction on the salesperson's prediction and their notes and their interpretation.
Exactly.
It's only half the story. You're never
exactly.
going to get it.
Exactly. And I'll give you the last example, and because AI and machine learning is that simple. If you have 100 pictures of a dog, and you show these 100 pictures of a dog to a kid, but you don't say that it's a dog, that kid does not learn anything from looking at these 100 pictures. The parent has to literally indicate every single time this is a dog, and this is like what's called a label. A label, which is basically tells the machine or us humans what it is that you're supposed to interpret is what's needed. And those labels are basically what we're talking about. And those labels can't come from machines. Those labels have to come from humans. You have to have a real account executive tell you this is going to close, this is not going to close. Without those labels, it doesn't matter how smart you are, you won't be able to make the prediction.
Are typical sales forces big enough to remove the bias that I talked about earlier?
Yes and no. Like a lot of people always are surprised by how little data you need. Like what's this assumption that for machine learning you need like vast amounts of data? It's not true at all. You need ample, which means like good, like enough data, and then diverse enough. And like I said, based on our I would say experience. As long as you have like 5-6 account executives, they should be able to give you enough diverse data sets and training data to actually then make an accurate prediction. And then on average, I would give you an example. If let's say each account executive was to label between 100 and 200 deals, that already puts you above that threshold to make a decent prediction.
You're doing that all on internal data, without any addition of third-party data that goes into the mix of the models that you use?
Very good question. So the data that we get from the outside, like we're obviously augmenting data, which let's say there are like various data providers out there that we can use to augment the data set. But the first priority is to get the labels. That means going back to the example of the image of a dog. The dog doesn't have to be that high def. Like you don't need a high def definition or like a picture of a dog to know what it's a dog. That means once you have the label, that's like the first priority. The second priority is then to actually go and look at feature richness and to like look at B2B CDPs that are out there that we all know of, and to augment basically the features that you can actually choose from. But the first priority is to enable businesses to collect what's called these labels. What's good and what's bad, and then second priority is to then augment the data set and to increase feature richness.
Okay, so now I know of some other companies. I'm not saying right or wrong, right? So I'm just putting another scenario into the place that basically say, okay, you don't need any human intervention. You need a sufficient set of data, just as you just said. So a few thousand opportunities, for example, with diversity, some external data, and what they claim, I just say claim because I haven't seen it, is that with that data, a sufficient set of external data, they can have a machine develop various models, test them against, well, the rest of the data, basically. And with the rest of the data, they then decide which model is best. And what they claim as well is that they achieve extremely high accuracy. Mm-hmm. It's in the 90%, yeah, which is really high, I think, without any human intervention. So this seems to be kind of contradicting the approach that you are using.
Well, in this case, I don't know exactly what you mean, but let's say unlabeled training data allows you to, let's say, categorize data. Let's say even if you don't know that this is a dog and this is a cat, with unlabeled data and without human interventions, you are able to like create, let's say, 2 categories. So this is possible. That's like also very clear. But without someone telling you that this is a dog and this is a cat, there is no way you can actually do any meaningful predictions. But at the end of the day, I'll give you an example. Let's say there are like a lot of the, let's say mature AI use cases, let's say credit card fraud prevention and whatnot, where the labeling is happening inherently. That means if a customer calls in and complains that the credit card charge was not what they initiated, then you're inherently labeling the data because the customer is telling you that there was something that they wouldn't have liked. So I don't know what example you're meaning, but like when it comes to actually building meaningful machine learning capabilities, at the end of the day, those brands and businesses that collect relevant and granular labeling or like labels will then outperform and outdo those who don't.
Well, the label is basically a deal. We came from a deal scenario, so we're talking about an opportunity, won or lost. So
but like won and lost is already a little bit too generic. Like I think one company that I think comes to mind is Clari AI. I think they're doing a really fantastic job, and I think their focus is to basically build a very, very they basically broaden the feature set and the feature richness for data in order to make the prediction. And it's like very, very black and whitish, where it's like saying like close or not close. But I think there are way more use cases where you can have like more, let's say, like granular labels that can then be used to then, let's say, do marketing use cases or customer retention. And I think widening the set of labels that you can get will then eventually allow you to like build superior machine learning capabilities.
I would like to add that nice and sexy picture, such as tomorrow you are in one of my favorite conferences, the Shift CX, which is where I'm the chairman, the honorable one in that. So I had to do that little teaser for your marketing folks. You invest there, a good investment. Next time there are some more opportunities arising. And I wanted to question, where do you see the market move? Where do you see your organization and your potential customers? Which do you want to win? And how can you, let's say, have some profitable opportunities as well in your perceived, let's say, development of the market? And yes, I hope that Prakash would have the first step answer.
Yeah, so look, we think Freshworks CRM will be useful for companies of all sizes and shape, because the problem is identical. It's just the scale of the problem that changes between these various companies, right? So, but what we are trying to do right now is focus on mid-market customers, which are our sweet spot right now, to drive this adoption and produce success and references around that. So if you had to pick one area where it is where there is a lot of traction, it's in the mid-market. And I tell you this, there is a lot of customers, lot more than we would like to believe, who feel that they have burnt themselves by trying to get these big CRM implementations bought the licenses, tried to do it, and they failed. And they are ready to try something which is easy to use, easy to onboard, and has a modern platform to integrate our solution into their business processes. So those are the ones that we're trying to go after. We are not particularly trying to go after a fully working CRM system of our competitor and tell our customers to rip and replace that. That's not what we're focused on. But it is surprisingly healthy market of dissatisfied, disgruntled CRM users. And even if you get a small sliver of that, we will be very successful. So that's how we are approaching it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you add up the numbers of the big five, then you are at probably 30% of 35% of the market. Means there are 65% left. So
exactly, yeah. And even at the 35%, there's probably 35% of the 35% who are unhappy with what they have and haven't used it. But our goal, look, in the next quarter or two, is to not just sell to customers. We feel selling is the easy part, is to get them to start using it, get them to start seeing value, and learn from that and make it a better product. So we are insanely focused on go live and adoption more than just selling and closing. So.
Together with the suite approach that you are having, so putting one CRM, which is kind of the suite is back, has an interesting tie to what David said earlier. Those who, what did he say in verbatim, that crack the nut about revenue models. I think this was the wording that you used. So, in combination with value, could you elaborate a little on that? How you see that? Well, how is that nut going to be cracked?
Yeah, crack the nut about revenue models will win. That was the quote. I read it from the paper.
I think, whether you're a product company or a services company, I think we're all learning that this concept of keeping a customer for life is the recipe to long-term survival. And if you don't have a good strategy, if you're still focused on individual transactional based growth, that's probably not a long-term strategy for success. And I think this world of customer acquisition and getting a customer and keeping a customer, those worlds need to collide. As we think about the KPIs, I think what's interesting is history tends to repeat itself. In the world of on-premise applications, we went from a very siloed niche, if you will, approach, and then gluing applications together. And then there was this huge disruption in the market, which was simply a deployment model called SaaS. And that was great. But this inherent complexity was still a byproduct of acquisitions. And just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean it doesn't need to be unified. Nothing lives alone. This problem of data silos is not it's too hard for a mid-sized and gluing applications together. So I think that is a huge opportunity. If a company can unify their KPIs, so if I'm a CMO or a chief revenue officer, if I can merge those goals together, not just the data, but from an operational perspective, that could be a huge opportunity for companies. And we're seeing that where more and more often a chief marketing officer will report to a chief revenue officer. So just from the reporting structure, we're seeing more and more companies recognize the need for a more unified business approach. And we are taking that technology approach to kind of mirror that need of the market, to kind of bring those experiences as not just the data together.
Okay, so now taking that a step back, so this nut needs to be cracked by software vendors as well. So what's your approach to, opening it up?
And you're allowed to give the marketing approach in Neo.
That's right. I'll let my technologist answer that probably better than me. But I think this bottoms-up approach, this, if I say an organic approach to things like data and AI, as opposed to a top-down, after-the-fact discussion, is a unique strategy from both a sales point of view and marketing. And I'm sure Peter or Prakash have a perspective as well.
Yeah, maybe one comment I would say is that these changes typically happen down market, mid market, and before they actually hit, let's say, some of the upper tiers. And I think like change doesn't happen overnight. Like if you were to, let's say, talk to Nike today and you ask them to like reorganize their entire go-to-market organization, that's hard, right? Because that's something that's been around for years. These silos do exist. And I think changes typically happen with new market entrants. So just the way we're new, we are working with like new businesses and like those businesses that are that have to come up with like a new way of doing things. And then I think and then like early adopters, right? Early adopters, those that are required to reimagine and like take the upper, like the superior way to interacting with customers. And I think that's what's happening, like including, like we're not the only ones that are a part of this group of CRM 2.0 vendors. And I think we all have this advantage of working with customers that are already kind of thinking in different ways. They have like different personas, and where the alignment in sales between sales and marketing is inherently better than for some of the more established mature brands.
Prakash, you're nodding.
I agree with Peter. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Everything else would have been very interesting in terms of having a discussion right now.
Yeah.
I have maybe just one more comment, because like I said, I'm so passionate about like Freddy AI, which is like obviously our machine learning capability. Is you mentioned earlier how there are vendors out there that kind of say that there is no human interaction needed. And I just realized that the elephant in the room is that these are typically vendors that don't own the UI. That means our big advantage at Freshworks is that we own the UI between users and our software. That means we are in a position to literally take advantage of the fact that we are able to, first of all, enable our businesses or like our customers to collect the training data, but then use the training data to then teach more advanced capabilities. So if we were like let's say some like a vendor that is offering only insights or like only AI predictions without owning the UI, then we would also have to rely on training data sets that don't require human interaction, and we would just try to go a little broader in terms of what the feature richness is by plugging in data sources so we can get our hands on. But our big advantage, and that's why I actually like the fact that you showed the slide earlier, is it's the trifecta of making AI work, the UI that we own, and then thirdly, the fact that we are able to build these use cases end to end and break those silos inherently.
So,
hi, Ellen.
I've heard of that guy.
Actually, Alan needs to update his profile picture because it's too late to vote.
So we always have a silly comment on an opportunity one is giving us. I tried to surprise him with the offer that he might spontaneously join if he likes, but I'm very happy that he gave us a friendly comment and is virtually waving. Yeah.
Whereas we
can wave back.
Have a challenge because I think we are limited to 6 participants.
As I can see, he is just an early adopter for
2024.
Yeah.
You see, it's real life.
You are up front of the rest of the market like Freshworks. We appreciate that approach. That is cool. Analyst relation combined with marketing. Cool move. So From that perspective, and asking a bit about where you see the future of the market and where you see your future, how many partners you have in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland?
We do have quite a few partners in the DACH region. I can get you the actual numbers offline. I don't have it. We have partners. One of the things we do is we work with local partners in each of these regions who understand the local customer, the local needs, and all of that. I just don't have it from top of my head. If Alan has it, he can chime in. But we will get you on that.
It was honestly not to tease you. It was to give you the honest approach, such as we are looking for partners. You may join in.
That is always true. That is always true. But we also have partners because we have our European headquarters is in Berlin, and we have regional offices throughout Europe. But our headquarters for Europe is in Berlin. And we do have partners, but we're always open to new partners. Being part of the ecosystem is very easy to build customization on our platform, on the Neo platform. So if there are people here, feel free to reach out to us. We would be delighted to have you on board.
That is lovely to hear and see, and famous word on being an early adopter. Alan is also proud, like you, to be a part of the family and being an early adopter to Freshworks. So we love to share that with the audience as well. And I know that you are heavily recruiting. It was one of the interesting side stories that Alan and myself came in a side discussion on a Playas event. And I saw myself as one of the CRM dinosaurs. And then his answer was, hey, I'm a dinosaur too. So I said, well, probably I could have a future with Freshworks. Well, another story, but interesting enough, I applied. Yeah. And now I know at least a charming Netherlands lady, which has another view on what is taking to get Freshworks forward. And I know it's not me.
Okay, so we passed the hour.
That's
probably.
Not so
I think I mentioned it before that we are not known for sticking to an hour. Prakash just gives a reminder that he has a customer call, which of course is less important than having fun, unless it's a funny call.
Sign of a good discussion. We much appreciate it.
We leave it up to you whether you would like to continue or not.
I will give it to Peter and David. I have to excuse myself because I have to just do the call with the customer.
Customer first.
Make it a fun one.
That is cool.
But I want to thank Ralph, you, Thomas, and Marshall for giving us a chance to talk to your audience. I really appreciate that. And if anybody has CRM pains, they know who to call. If they have support pains, if they want to hold, like David said it well, if you want to have customers for life and happy employees, we have solutions that will help you enable that. So thanks again.
Thanks for coming in, Prakash.
Yeah, Freshworks.
Yeah.
I'll leave it.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Prakash.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys.
So we are still here. So what? Actually, I had another one that was in how far. So the question I asked a little earlier, David, Peter, and you may or may not be willing to answer that. So what I was after is pricing models in the software industry, which seems to be a pretty tough topic right now. Yeah, so it's there's this discussion price versus value. And then while buying something, if you buy something, you usually buy first and then have the chance to harvest the value. To get the value. You may be getting some value out of it and maybe not. The vendor already has this value. So subscription is a way into the right direction, but how do you see these kinds of models evolve in general, not with not necessarily relating to Freshworks now, but in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add one comment, just something I've seen being in the software space for a while, going from perpetual license to SaaS. And, I would say one consistent theme I've seen across vertical industries and markets is increased complexity in terms of how you monetize the relationship with our customers. So there's a certain element of diversification. So just like Freshworks, we're a SaaS company. We're selling a product, but we also sell services. There's just a lot of companies have support functions. So there's a diversity in revenue models, which needs to be monetized effectively. And also from an account executive, he or she needs to understand how to articulate that overall value. And then the second piece I would say I've seen more often is more value, this trend toward more value-based pricing, which is kind of difficult. Well, how do you define value for a customer? And from a software point of view, the key metric of success is usually the customer has to go live, right? It's no longer are we selling a license where who cares if the customer uses our product? Do we even know? I mean, 15 years ago, if you asked me how are your customers using your on-premise CRM, I wouldn't really know if they are unless they logged a support ticket. I mean, I have no idea. But the telemetry we get with cloud can be very powerful. But definitely we are seeing customers that might want to say, hey, I don't want to be charged until I'm live. Or maybe how can you demonstrate benchmark value-based pricing as I am drinking from your subscription services? We're seeing that in retail as well as B2B. So we are seeing more of a trend where it's outcome based. What are the specific outcomes the customer is looking for, as opposed to just a service? Because subscription does not imply value. That happens in many cases after the close.
Yeah, well, nearly all cases, isn't it?
I've also thought, because I've watched like the big roundtable from last month or so, the Big Five. I think that was like one of these topics. And it's a tough one, right? Because the challenge, in my opinion, is that in order to make it work, the customer and the vendor, they have to work with each other, right? So if you put the expectation entirely on the customer to make it work, it's not going to work, right? But at the same time, if you put the expectation on the vendor to make it work for the customer, I think we're maybe even going above and beyond what is possible. Because I think making it work for the customer can only happen, in my opinion, in a partnership where both are trying hard. Yeah. And in a world where it's like a purely value, like there's like based on value, that would kind of put the expectation purely on the vendor. And I don't know how realistic that is, because I think maybe over time we'll get there, because I think in the end we kind of compete against each other in terms of how much value we provide to businesses and brands. And then businesses kind of vote by with their wallets which customer, like which brand or like which vendor provides the most value, and then over time we might get there. But to expect that overnight we can just flip a switch and all of a sudden like change how things are, I'm not sure that's possible, right?
Yeah, and there's an element of behavior which needs to change on the sales side as well. How we compensate our sellers has also implications on whether or not value will actually be sold. So I think that's also a challenge that organizations face as well.
And there's a third party involved oftentimes, which is the implementation partner or an SI.
Exactly. It's like basically three partners. Like you got the vendor, you got the implementation partner, and the customer.
And your advantage, as Alan quotes is that Fresh Success is even in the way helping that you not only can measure the utilization, but also the benefit one has out of utilizing your solution suite. And I'm always the curious marketing chap in one of my former business lives. If you have one sentence to tell us and the audience why they should buy you and not the others, what would that be?
So Peter, I'll take a first stab and give you more time to think. Just because I like you. So
that's typically how it works. Like he buys me time.
Yeah, take one for the team. I tell you,
teamwork.
I guess. So,
I love it.
So the first thing that came to mind was this concept of customer lifetime value.
Yeah.
So this, which is it's sort of a squishy data point or KPI, but I think it's important, and everyone in the organization, from marketing, sales to delivery to support to finance, plays a role. And I think the only way to really understand which customers are profitable and to grow that lifetime value is to take a truly a customer lifetime approach. And it requires a going away from the short-sighted vision of MQLs and bookings to having the organization rally behind a single lens of what success looks like, and that idea of customer lifetime value or customer for life is part of the digital transformation. And if you can get there quickly, you will have a significant first mover advantage against the competition. And I feel that's what Freshworks is committed to, which I think is unique to the industry.
Good starting point.
Yeah,
David, I'm proud of you. Now, Peter.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, follow that, Peter.
So here's what I would say. So I don't think that we are any smarter or any dumber than any of the other incumbents. Like I would say, at the end of the day, what I strongly believe in is that each business has inherent advantages and disadvantages. And the advantages that we have is that we simply started later. That means we didn't have to deal with a lot of the baggage that the incumbents have to deal with because they started earlier. And you can't really say that we're any better or worse. It's just that we are later to the game and we're able to start from scratch, and we're able to learn from like the incumbents' mistakes. Right. So at the end of the day, it's like I said, we're not any smarter or like any more creative or anything like that. We just have the advantage that we started later. That means the challenge of understanding that marketing and sales should work with each other is something that no one could have known. They could have known it, but like they would have, it wouldn't have mattered. Right. So that means we're basically addressing or like building a CRM 2.0 based on knowledge that we as an industry developed over the last 10, 15 years. And I think that's what it is. At the end of the day, that's like one big advantage. One big advantage is that obviously that we're building sales, marketing, and service across the same tech stack. It's basically organically built. And then the second big advantage is, which is then truly unfair, is what we talked about earlier, collecting and gathering relevant training data. Because at the end of the day, relevant training data is basically what I would call stickiness 2.0. Because 10 years ago, it was hard to imagine how you would switch from one cloud vendor to the other. But imagine doing that with training data that is specific to machine learning models that no one really understands right now. But I can tell you already that in 10, 15 years from now, we'll have a similar webinar, and there will be someone who's going to point out all the gaps and the misses that we had building Freshworks CRM. So it's nothing that inherently makes us smarter or dumber. It's just that we had the advantage of seeing these things after the fact.
So the pun is obvious. You're fresh to the market here.
Yeah, and I think that's right. So I think that's what our CEO always talks about, is that no one could have known that making these things work with each other would become such a big deal.
Working with each other is exactly Michael's question. how do you interoperate with Microsoft Teams? You have an integration or collaboration between Freshworks and Teams?
Yeah, very good question. Is that we obviously launched our integration with Slack just recently. In Q1 of 2021, we'll have the collaboration capabilities with Microsoft Teams available as well. So I think those two are arguably very, very strong in the market. And like I said, Slack is already released. Teams is being worked on right now and should be available in Q1.
And then after Prakash is looking for the customer, our man from the off is helping again with his thoughts, such as Freshworks has products end users love. This is very emotional and is a partner for the long run to help you nurture, acquire, and retain customers for life.
I like that.
This is cool. I love that.
This guy is really good. You should consider giving him a job.
This is honestly, this is what you said when you started, that you love to work for that company with your former experiences, and that you really show people in the audience that you love what you do and you do what you love. Yeah, this is just fabulous.
Excellent. But I think maybe that's just noteworthy. Like I think even beyond like the relevance and the role that it plays to collect relevant training data. I think we've been recognized for the last several years for building software that's like very user friendly. It's really pleasing. It's very, very appealing to your eye. That means it's just like it's fun to kind of work interact with Freshworks CRM. That alone is not going to solve any of the problems that we talked about earlier, but that's, I think, just one element that we've that I think is noteworthy when it comes to Freshworks CRM.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I think our goal is we look at things like Outlook and productivity tools, like were just mentioned in Teams. Why should CRM be anything different in terms of that tool of choice for a sales or marketing professional? Ultimately, it should be the tool of choice. At the moment, it's not. It's maybe 18% of the time or less. I've heard some data in terms of how much a seller spends in or out of that, in or out of their CRM, and that's pulling teeth at that. And so I think this kind of goes back to this user experience first design principle, and it is inherently tied to everything else we talked about. In terms of usefulness of data, getting value-based pricing. I think it all starts with that kind of user and delightfulness of using the application, because if they're not using it, there can't be any value.
Well, while you're talking about collaboration, and I know that this is something that Freshworks is looking at. I think it's just something we're not discussing in this particular stream, is the value to the customer experience. It's become more and more important that everyone in an organization be somewhat responsible for each customer interaction, for each customer account. And the easier it is for the marketer, and for the salesperson, and for the customer service people to work together to talk about what's going on in a particular case with a particular customer, the better that customer experience is going to be. So there's even more value for the interaction layer.
And I think now there's a thing about it, like given that we're a little bit like taking our time, but like it's funny how oftentimes when we build software, it's oftentimes the obvious things that we don't focus on. And I think usability and user experience and empathy for the end user then has all these side benefits that you probably didn't even think you could have. And I think that's probably at the end of the day the core behind all of these things. Yeah.
And you talk to the inventor, at least of the buzzword of empathic CRM. Yeah. So this is, I love to very much, not only in COVID time, benefit focus, showing empathy, and make a cool story for it. And now it's to Tom to do the wrap up.
Hot potato.
Hot potato. Hot potato.
Yes, we are already well past the hour. And I think, Peter, David, you had just some very good and interesting, famous last words, actually. I'd really love to thank you for your participation, for your opinions and statements. It's not only opinions, your insights. That's
right.
Insights, that's the word. Same for Prakash once, if you can tell him once more, please. That was really highly enlightening, not only for us, but for everyone who cares to listen in and who should listen in, which we will encourage people after this fact. Also, Alan, of course, the one with this last sentence that he drove the products that users love. I think that's a very good statement and summary. So many thanks again. I hope we will be able to do this once again, because there are plenty of additional questions that we can come into and topics that we could discuss. So we, as you can see from our preparation sheet, we didn't even cover the first two of them.
That gives you a fantastic opportunity next time to prepare some takeaways, such as we do have the cherries on the chart just for the ones which stay till the end.
Yeah. So many thanks. Good success. Have fun tomorrow, Peter.
Absolutely.
The XTX, you will meet Ralph there again. So maybe you will get some nasty questions out of the off.
Very nice.
I love it. Well, thank you guys as well. I learned a lot myself, and these types of conversations is how we propel the industry and the thought process forward. Thank you for the platform.
You're most welcome. Thank you for being in there, because it's kind of a mutual benefit.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. And, well, time to go offline. Not necessarily, but offline.
Ciao. Auf Wiedersehen.